Hi, and welcome back to the Technology Evangelist podcast. I'm Dr. John Fluke, Technology Evangelist, and we're lucky enough to be sponsored by Medidenta Digital in this endeavor. Today, we have one of my best friends on the planet and a guy that I have worked with for, gosh, hopefully he knows because I'm not even sure how long we know each other. But he's my good buddy, Noah Levine. We worked together at Dental Products Report for a long time. And last year he left, moved over to Connexient, as you can see from the background behind him. Noah, thank you for taking the time to be with me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. It's always great to chat.
Thank you. Well, Noah, I always start off with an origin story because I think they're fascinating and I always want to know more about people. So why don't you to start things off, why don't you tell us, what you do and how you got to this magical point in your career?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm currently the editorial director here at Connexient. I'm overseeing a bunch of publications, including Inside Dentistry, Compendium, ADA News. And, I was one of those people who knew he wanted to be a journalist from early on. I went to college for journalism, and I spent a number of years working at newspapers and things like that. And then found myself about 15, 16 years ago. The economy was downturning. There were layoffs at my current publication, and I was in need of a job. And at that point, it was, I'll take anything. So I applied for a magazine editor job that was basically all it said, magazine. It said it was run by a company named Advanced Star, and I looked at their portfolio, and they ran a very wide gamut of publications. They had everything from motorsports to a whole bunch of medical things, including their dental division, which was Dental Products Report. I found out that was what I was applying for when I got an interview, and I came in, and I, thought I made a good impression on the editors at the time, both of whom are people I'm still in touch with today, Thais Carter and Stan Goff. Absolutely wonderful people and terrific editors. And, I think they wanted to hire me, but I also might have only gotten the job because the publisher at the time happened to also be an alum of Ohio University, where I went to school. So, it might have just been happenstance. But like many people in this dental industry, I found my way into dentistry and I've never left. I worked my way up in that newsroom from being the lowest level reporter, handling whatever was coming through, all the way up to I ended up as managing editor at Dental Lab Products for about a year before I had an opportunity to leave and go to Dental Compare, which at the time was an online marketplace product directory website. I ran their content and their programming for a while, and then went back to DPR, which was great because John and I got to work together once again, and was working there for quite a while when a former publisher reached out and said, hey, this company Connexient is about to do some really exciting things. There might be some good opportunities. And so about a year ago, I made the move to come over here and take on this bigger portfolio of publications. And it's been, just a great time. I love being a part of the dental industry, and definitely have a lot of fun getting to meet lots of great people and learn about all sorts of great technologies.
Well, and I think it's cool. Well, two things, because you got out at the right time. As people know, Dental Products Report doesn't exist anymore. And Noah managed to get out in August, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we were all blindsided. Those of us that were still there were blindsided in December when they shut the magazine down. And so that was a great piece of luck. You landed on your feet out of that one. And I think it's funny too. I like to say that dentistry is like the Hotel California. People check out, but they never leave. And it seems like once you get it in your blood, um, on the industry side, the publication side, people may move jobs, but it seems like they always stay in the field, which I think is really cool because, we worked together at DPR for a long time. You left, stayed in dentistry, came back to DPR. We worked together for an even longer time and more closely then in your role then. And Then you move on to Connexient, and with the cease of existence of DPR, I now get a chance to work with you some more through Connexient. So I think it's really cool. And one of the things I think is great about what you do is that you get to bring a non-dentist's side of the equation to things, because you're somebody who's pretty knowledgeable about dentistry and about the tech in dentistry and the things we do. But at the same time, you're a consumer of the profession. And I think that gives you a really cool insight into the way things are going.
Well, I appreciate that. I've been, as I said, a journalist for a very long time, and that's always what I've wanted to be. And that means I'm always learning. There's a joke on The Simpsons that I always like to repeat when Marge Simpson was looking for a way to make some extra money, and she decided she wanted to be a piano teacher. And the comment that was made to her by another character was like, "But you don't play the piano." And she said, "Well, I only have to stay one lesson ahead of the students." And that's kind of how it feels sometimes as being a journalist. You got to learn something new, learn it well enough, and then, you share that information with other people, and then you move on to the next thing. And being able to specialize in dentistry has been just a lot of fun because people don't really understand this industry when they're not a part of it. And I think that's a shame. And I think that, the research is there. We all know your oral health is a key part of your overall health. And even medical professionals, MDs, don't quite get that yet. And I think it's an important thing that, the media in the dental space continue to thrive and publish and make sure that we share these stories and let people understand that, the dentist isn't just some guy who, like in Little Shop of Horrors, is there to hurt you. The dentist is there to be a key member of your healthcare team. And, everyone's got teeth, and everyone hopefully should be able to keep them so that they can live the life that, having your healthy mouth really makes possible.
What you said is so true. When I was in dental school, there was a lady that worked in the communications department of the school, and she was really quite a good artist. And she had a picture in her office. And I remember one time she came in and gave us a lecture, and she showed it in her lecture. And it was a cartoon of she'd drawn this patient with this huge mouth. It was like a kind of a average size head, but a huge mouth, and then a body, like an inch long. And it said how dentists see the world. And then it was basically the same cartoon, only the mouth and the head were tiny and the body was huge. And it said how physicians view the world. And it really is, like you said, I mean, we all know the mouth-body connection exists. And that knowledge base has only grown in the past 30 years, but there is still that kind of disconnect between medicine and dentistry on, what dentists can do with all kinds of situations for overall systemic health. And I do think that journalism plays a really big part in getting that information out, even to the profession, because the way a lot of people are finding out about new things in dentistry is either through still print publications and through the online content that you all have. And I know Connexions got a huge online footprint that you're involved in.
And that's actually one of the reasons I went to Axiom. It's, we are currently the largest publisher of dental media. We have the most titles and, the biggest reach in the dental industry, but we also have a reach throughout the healthcare space. And we are publishing content that is aimed at crossing those divides. And we're looking to, reach a dental audience with news about, cardiology studies that might be important. I just, worked on an article today that had to do with a study that finds they keep discovering that oral bacteria is in the plaque that they're finding on people's hearts, and
Yeah.
direct connection there. And it goes to show the more we learn about the exact function of the microbiome that's in the mouth, the more likely we're going to be able to help people with a whole range of systemic things, because if that bacteria is making its way through the gums, we know, and down into the heart, maybe we can stop it at the gums, keep
Ah,
people healthier. And
somebody
that's
once told
exciting.
me, I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody that did education once told me that if you took the human mouth, if somebody walks into a dental office and they had, uh, you know, 28 teeth, and all of those teeth had 6 millimeters of periodontal pockets, completely circumferentially, and they all bled when they were probed, that if you took that same surface area and put it on the human hand, it would basically occupy almost the entire palm of the patient's hand. And when you, yeah, when you think about things like that, where if you have got a wound on your palm that basically encompasses almost your entire palm, and you think about if it's an open wound and always moist and always dark, what could get in there and what could, cause problems. I mean, that's a massive entrance for all kinds of pathogens into the body.
And, this is, in my mind, one of the real exciting times. As much as I'm a student of, news as a journalist, I also am a student of history, and I've, been in the dental industry long enough to look into what is the history of our industry? How have we gotten to where we are, and where did things go? And in this case, dentistry seems to be on the precipice of sort of another revolution. There's been multiple revolutions throughout dentistry, and start of operative dentistry, and had GB Black discovering and really codifying a lot of things. But then this is an area where we're really getting ready to really bring a much more medical and focused approach to how we not just handle the bacteria in there, but also restorative things. Remineralization attempts are, happening, and all sorts of other regenerative things are in research right now. And it's a time where I think dentists really do need to keep their ears to the ground and really pay attention to what are the new opportunities we can use to treat patients, to diagnose patients. And, it's really never been a time like this where there are so many new areas where people are having breakthroughs technologically so that you can do more and help more people in a way that you really couldn't before. And I think as much as the dentists are really taking advantage of some of these opportunities, the patients out there, and I'm a patient, you mentioned that, I see it as a consumer, they're just starting to catch on to what is happening in a dental practice. They're just getting to the point where patients know what a digital impression is versus a physical impression. And that's not new technology. I mean, when Dentsply is going to celebrate the 40th anniversary of CEREC coming up, and that's, 4 decades of that technology being around. But it's gotten better and better, and now patients finally at the point where they recognize that this is something that they probably want, because if they've had an impression taken with impression material, they're likely going to prefer to have someone scan their mouth, especially with the newer scanners that are smaller, faster, and easier.
You know, it's funny that you brought that up, because I remember one of the last lectures that I got when I was in school. It was a Crown and Bridge lecture, and one of the instructors said, "There's this thing in Germany, and I don't even think it has a name yet, but it's a camera that you take pictures of the teeth, and out of that they can create this 3D computerized, picture of the tooth, and then they'll be able to build something around it." And he said the exciting part about this is I can maybe see someday in the future when, we won't be taking impressions anymore. And I remember that, because the minute he said that, I hated taking impressions. I never considered myself very good at it. And that just locked in on me, because I thought, I got to get one of those. Whenever that stuff comes on the market, I've got to get one of those. And now, like you said, we're to the point where we've got these, small wireless devices that scan with, equal accuracy or greater accuracy of an impression, faster, you know, digital, able to move it around, able to build things virtually. Um, there's been like no better time to be a dentist. And the other story I'll tell you, I'm not sure if I've ever told you this one. I
Mhm.
had an instructor of mine in dental school who was, gosh, he seemed ancient at the time, so he was probably 60, But he told me the great thing about dentistry is that when you leave here, you won't have to change anything you're doing for the rest of your career. And that was another one that stuck with me because I don't do anything except maybe hold a mirror the same way that I was trained, so that it's a great time to be in the industry. So
But
you mentioned
at the
something.
same
Oh,
time,
go ahead. No, go ahead. I
yeah,
interrupt
what
you.
I'm
Go ahead.
saying, at the same time, I imagine all of the foundational principles, all of the key things that you learned about occlusion, how the mouth is supposed to function, how a tooth is supposed to fit where it fits and why, that hasn't changed. But the
No,
tool used to affect the care that you provide, that has the same thing has happened in journalism. I don't use any of the tools I used in journalism school, but the principles I learned, they're all the same things, and how to put together information, how to source it, how to make sure you provide it to people in a way that they're going to both understand and believe and really, give you the credence that you are giving them information that's accurate and valuable. And we use different tools, but at the same time, you got to use the modern tools while also adhering to those principles. And I think that that's a core thing, not just in dentistry and not just in journalism, but in any field that's having technology disrupt how it, processes what it does. Mhm. The principles are
you
never going to
mentioned
change.
you mentioned something with that, and I want to get a professional journalist's opinion on this. Is that in the last 2.5 years, since February 23, everybody talks about AI.
Mhm.
And obviously, there's a lot of AI applications in dentistry. But one of the things where I think I really want to hear a professional journalist's opinion on is AI in writing. Because, like you said, the rules don't change, the ethics don't change. So, kind of give me a little bit about your opinion on how AI is impacting what you do.
Well, I will be, the first to say that AI is a huge part of writing and publishing today, and I'm a big fan of that. But it's a tool, and you have to use it in any way, in the right way, and understand why and how you're
Mhm.
using it. And it's one of those tools that is dangerous in that it can do so much. But in the end, you have to understand what you're doing. So I use a number of AI applications throughout my, day because they do different things and they do them well. I
Right.
have very messy handwriting. So when I take notes on things, I still like to write with a pen because it's just how my brain functions. Typing it while listening, I'm just not able to pick things up the same way. So I have an AI application that reads my handwriting and it keeps getting better because it keeps reading my handwriting and it translated into typed notes. That's great. I use AI for transcription. When I was first starting out, we used to record with a little tape recorder, little
Right.
mic sets, and then we'd take them back to the newsroom where they had a set. You'd put on these uncomfortable headphones and you had a little foot pedal to start and stop it playing and reverse it so that you could transcribe it. And it took, if you did an hour interview, you might take 2 hours to transcribe it if you were good. So, now I let an AI do it. And I'm always amazed at how effective they are, especially with people's names, with
Hmm.
terminology. These are not easy words to sound out. And even with accents, they just keep getting better. Guess it's been almost 2 years now. I was invited to speak about AI in publishing at the Association of Dental Journal Editors meeting, which happens in conjunction with the ADA meeting. And I was part of a panel discussion with a bunch of academics who work at various dental schools. And we all gave a short presentation before the panel discussion started. And the amazing thing was there were four of us. None of us collaborated beforehand. And we all brought the same message with a lot of the same points, which was AI is here. Here's what it is and how it works. And for writing, large language models have become the thing. ChatGPT has taken over and it gets better and better. But do I let ChatGPT write my articles for me? No, it's not able to bring that same level of attention to detail, accuracy, because what it is a machine that's programmed to guess words based on an incredible set of data. And so it can reference a huge amount of information to guess what should be the next word within the context of your prompt. But you have to learn how to prompt it properly. So what I do, I use it to create outlines. It does a great job of putting together an outline, and I know enough about the subject matter to know where it goes wrong. And that's the key. If I know where it's gone wrong, it points me in the right direction. It's the same thing if I'm editing copy someone submits to me and I can tell this needs to be fixed in a certain way. It's a lot
Right.
easier to fix something that exists than to create it from thin air. So I will sometimes have ChatGPT take a crack at a first draft, and then I basically rewrite the whole thing. But it's much faster to rewrite the whole thing when I've got this thing that is wrong. Every once in a while, it comes up with a good turn of phrase, but usually it's pretty cliched because it's picking from previously published information. So it's easy to spot when it's been used to write an email or to write an article. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be used as part of the process. It's no different than if you upload a intraoral scan of a prep and get an AI designed crown design to mill or print in your practice, that comes back, but you're not just going, all right, send it up and then it goes straight to the mill. You're
Right.
going to look at that when it comes back and you're going to make sure, are the cusps the right way? Is it going to have the height that I need? Is it going to have the thickness that I need on the sides? These are all the things that your expertise as a dentist comes into play, but the AI has made that first design so much faster than you can, and it's given you that framework to fix. And the time you're going to spend fixing it should be less than the time it takes you to do it from scratch. So that's why it's a useful tool. And it's really the exact same thing with writing. So would I ever turn anything over where an AI would write everything and no human would touch it? No, because it's not going to be able to create on its own. It is piecing together things from previous knowledge, but gets you very far along the process. And so, yeah, we use AI for all sorts of other parts of our editorial workflows. But in the end, everything goes through editors, everything goes through authors, and we all work to make sure that it is a unique piece of copy before it's published.
Well, and that's why I'm so glad that you answered that, because I know that in people I talk to, there's this misconception that everything they read, not just in dentistry, but just in general, oh, it's all AI generated now and it's all, mishmash. And I thought that was a great analogy of comparing it to mine, because yeah, every situation is unique. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that, yeah, what everything we read is not now just, generated by some computer. I mean, you and I have talked in other instances about people that did crazy stuff like that, where they published it and then, you know, people were telling them, that's way off base,
Yeah.
what you said. And then suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, reel that back in. And it's easier not to have to reel something back in. Just do it right the first time.
Another analogy I really like to use for this is, everyone starts, and in grade school, you're learning arithmetic. You learn how to add, you learn how to multiply, you learn how to do long division, and you got to do it on paper and show all your work, and it takes a lot of time. And then at some point, you start getting to do math that's more complicated, and they give you a calculator to do those basic things. But you don't get to use that calculator until you understand what that calculator is actually doing for you. And that's not going to say you'll never make a mistake when you use a calculator, but AI is a similar thing. You need to learn to write on your own. You need to learn how to put things together on your own. But once you get to a certain point, it's going to help you skip some of those steps so you can get to the more complicated problems and the more complicated tasks. And that's really what any tool is doing. It's making the mundane parts of what you need to do easier so you can get to the parts of it that really take your specialization.
Yeah, I've been saying for a long time, I think the difference between AI is, like if you see some of them are pretty good, but you can see some images are AI generated and they use what look like human models in them.
Yeah.
Normally, if you look close enough at the image somewhere, you can tell that, it wasn't designed by a human. And sometimes it's just even just the way the people look. And I like to say that, a computer doesn't have a soul, and there's something that comes out in the written word, the spoken word, the image that an artist makes. There's a certain amount of humanity and kind of a, air quotes, soul in that a machine just can't replicate.
Yeah. And you can direct the machines and do enough directing them to get it to create something unique. But at least for now, the types of AI that we have access to, large language models, which
Mhm.
whether they're doing video or images or analyzing data or writing for you, the people talk about, if they talk about how they work, there's a black box. No one knows exactly how the sausage gets made inside the AI.
Yeah.
We do know where it comes from, the data set that it's trained on. It
Mhm.
learns based on a whole lot of information. Now, you and I can't take that much information and synthesize it. We could never read that many books or look at that many pictures,
Right.
but it's still coming up with its best guess based on previously existing things. It's not able to create something completely new. It's not inventing a story. It is using previously invented stories to come up with something. That's not to say it can't come up with good ideas, but
Right. Right.
they're never going to be fully original because they are always going to be based on previous examples that it has been trained on. So if you know more about the data set it's trained on, when we look at, the AI image analysis that now is all over dentistry, this is one of the technologies, people talk about dentists are slow to adopt new technologies. This one is moving at a much faster pace than most of,
Yes. Yeah.
and it's easy to use, it integrates, but every one of those companies talks about, this is the data set we trained on. This is the number of radiographs that we
Mhm.
had it analyzed. And you know what? There was a human at one point who went in to tell the machine, this is caries. This is, not. This is healthy tissue. And it needs to know that in order to make, again, its best guess at, I'm looking at this one, and based on this reference of millions of previous radiographs, this is what I think is disease. This is what I think is healthy tissue. And you know what? That's how you learned to do it too when you were in dental school. You had to look at a whole bunch of radiographs to understand what they are. So,
Absolutely.
and at the same time, I've seen a lot of debates. Are these going to lead to overdiagnosing or, over-treatment of things? Because it's going to find stuff that you didn't necessarily find before. But again, it's got to be paired with the right treatment method, and it's got to be paired with the right clinical decision-making that comes from a doctor, a human who has had that training.
Yeah.
At the end, the machines can help a lot. There's so many cool technologies out there that can make it easier for a dentist to get the results they want. But in the end, you still have to know what you're doing. I had a great experience trying out that Yomi robotic
Yeah.
implant surgery guide. And you know what? You give it a plan, and it will not let you deviate from that plan. I tried. I took 2 hands on the handpiece and tried to pull it off course, tried to, just how can I do this?
Ah,
Because, I don't know what I'm doing. No one would want me to have a handpiece and start drilling into, their jaw
yeah,
so I can place an implant. But if that thing gives a person off the street a plan that a dentist who knows what they're doing has done, it is going to make sure that that plan is executed to the best of its sensor's ability to stay on
right.
top, to stay on track, to stay at depth. But the plan in the first place, that's got to come from someone who knows what's right and wrong. And
Yeah.
so we're going to continue to see these technologies make this stuff easier to get to the results that we want without as much interaction. But we need to know what that correct result is before we can even start. And that's where dental school comes in. That's where the dental professionals are always going to be the ones driving this. Use the technology, learn how it works, put it into use to better your care for your patients, but never forget that you're the one in control. You're the one who has to know what the decision should be. And as a patient, I love seeing all the technology. When I go into my dentist practice, they've got all sorts of things. Not every newfangled, thing I know all about, but they have plenty of technology that I feel comfortable that they are keeping up with the times. They're providing care that is state of the art, but they're not using everything on every patient because they know when and where they need to use it.
Well,
And
didn't you tell me that like within the last year or so, you did actually have to change offices, right?
yeah, about a year and a half ago, I changed
Okay.
offices. And
And you were mentioning to me, okay, when I was, looking at these offices online, I was looking for, certain things as a patient.
yeah,
And I remember one of them was, do they have a scanner? And I thought that was a really great idea to look at.
mhm, yeah. And I mean, the baseline I tell my friends who know what I do ask me dental questions all the time. We don't happen to have a dentist in our circle of friends, so I get the default dental questions.
Right.
Should I do about this? What about that? And, you know, I basically tell them, the baseline. If you are looking for a new dentist and they do not have digital x-rays,
Hmm.
run.
Yeah.
That needs to be your baseline. But at this point, I'm also telling them that they should have a scanner. They should be doing an initial scan when you come in. Whether they do it every time you come in, that's up to the practice. But they should take a digital impression, if for no other reason than to show you that they have this technology, and
Yeah.
it keeps the team practiced and using the equipment all the time so that they're ready when they do have a case that really needs something. That said, yeah, I looked for a practice, and in my case, I was looking mostly to move because of the practice I was at was further from where I now live. And I liked the dentist, I liked their practice. They were definitely up on the technology. They did great work. But I'm someone who been lucky enough. I've never had a cavity, never needed anything beyond
Wow.
some sealants as a kid that are still in there doing their job, what, 40 some years later. And, you know, now, occasionally, I get, an extra fluoride treatment or some other things when I'm there, but my teeth have held up, and that's great. So I needed a practice that would be ready if I needed them. But I also wanted to make sure, you know, my family was going to be, if we could all go to the same place, then we have a better rapport with the hygienists and with the front office staff. Because as a patient, I barely see my dentist because I'm not a patient who needs the dentist's care.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of patients who, you know what? I know to brush my teeth. I'm lucky enough to have a chance to try out all the latest home care devices. That said, if I do need treatment, I know the dentist knows what they're doing. There's, several at the practice, but I see them for 2 minutes at an appointment because they
Sure.
come in. If I took x-rays that time, they look at the x-rays, they take a peek in my mouth, go, okay, yeah, things look good. There's nothing here we're concerned about. And they are out of the room. But my hygienist, I have a, conversation with her every time I come in. She and I, she knows what I do, so she knows that, I know all about all the things she's doing and everything she's
Right.
using. I always tell her if there's something new that they're trying to introduce patients to, and I want to hear her pitch. How are
Yeah.
they introducing this? If they've got, something that's an auxiliary service or something that has an extra charge, how are they communicating about it to their patients? I always tell them, give me the regular, I'm happy to provide, my thoughts on it.
Right.
You know, you're going to pitch me on using a new technology for diagnostics, and I'll tell you, I'll already know what it is, how it works, where it came from, etc. But I want to hear how you talk about it. What I found most interesting recently is they are using AI on their x-rays. As soon as they pop up on the screen and I see that overlay with the boxes, I know what that is. They're not actually introducing that to their patients that they're using the AI. They're just using it for the reasons that they are, for diagnostic purposes, to tell them where to take an extra look. They're still
Yeah.
looking at the x-rays like they always did. And I thought that was an interesting decision. And I think that's one of those things where AI still scares people, and they might be concerned, oh, you're just letting AI diagnose my teeth. I don't know if that was their decision, why if they made the decision that way. But that said, they are using that technology and they're using it on every patient that gets x-rays. And I think that that's the way that it should be used. And I'm pleased to see that they have it. I commented on it afterwards saying, by the way, I noticed that, you had the AI take a look at the x-rays. I think that's great. And they said, yeah, we're real happy with what it's doing. But again, they're not, they are not necessarily telling every patient on that technology. I thought it was also interesting because my daughter had her checkup appointment just last week, and it was the first time I've seen them, because this was a new change. They didn't put an apron over her when they did her x-rays,
Yeah.
because obviously the recommendations from the ADA have changed on that. And the research is there to show that the x-ray generators today are collimated enough to be safe. You don't need that extra protection because the radiation is all going right there, right
Yeah.
where it's supposed to go. And, I thought it was interesting that they didn't say anything. I mean, I think, again, they know that I know this stuff,
Yeah.
but, my daughter didn't question it. She's young enough that she won't necessarily, remember that that was a thing, or that that was, part of the practice. But again, we all change. I remember as a kid going to see my dentist and hating the experience because he didn't wear gloves, and I could
hmm
feel the cigarettes on his fingers
Yeah.
when he
Yeah.
was poking around in my mouth. And as much as, I was entertained by the Yoda figure that was glued to the top of his overhead light, you know, I also, you know, dreaded that because of that experience. And now when I think back on it and I think, oh my gosh, he wasn't wearing gloves. How could someone not wear gloves and be practicing dentistry? But these
Yeah.
things change, and we need to be okay to change and adapt with the times. I'm always impressed at how the dental industry itself can evolve and really see that new technologies work, but also the things that you don't get rid of, things that you add to the practice and you don't. I mean, we saw it 5 years ago when the pandemic happened and there was the panic and everyone went, oh my gosh, dental practices are the most dangerous place for people to be. They need to
Yeah.
shut down. And then they reopened and everyone was, you know, basically, oh my gosh, do we need these extra air suction things to,
Yes.
pull the, all of the aerosols out of the way? It's such a dangerous environment. We're just stirring up all of the, bacteria and making it worse. And then as the research came out, because obviously this was a great natural studying point, we could do a lot of research on this. You know what it turned out? The precautions that clinicians were already taking with their masks and their gloves and all of the other PPE that they were using beforehand were providing the protection needed, even against a bacterial or a viral infection like, COVID.
Yeah.
That's great to learn. Yeah, we already were doing it. We were keeping our practitioners safe. We were keeping our patients safe from our practitioners. And we just need to keep doing what we were doing. So now you don't see all those suction devices and things like that, or some of the crazy bubbles people were having, on top of patients to,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
and yeah, people were in a bit of a panic mode 5 years ago. And I think, it took everyone by surprise how pervasive and, just impactful it was on how people practiced. But you didn't keep using these things when you
Right.
realized they weren't necessary. And then that's the same thing with the lead aprons. We've done the research. It's good science that shows patients are still safe. Patients are, we need these x-rays until we have a better way of imaging. And hopefully there is a, radiation-free way of imaging that is commercially viable at some point. But until then, they're safe as can be. And that is one of the things I think people need to get their head around is nothing's 100% safe. Nothing
Yeah.
is perfect in that way, but we want to reach the highest standard we can. And we only learn that what that standard is by continuing to do research. Even if science isn't about learning something and being done. It's about learning something and then continuing to see, is that still accurate? And as we learn more, we did more science, we learned a different outcome, then we progress and go with that. As long as we hold the standards of the research up and really make sure that it is done in a proper way and studies are done with, out bias and without, undue influence,
Mhm.
we need to be willing to make a change when that change happens. I unfortunately think we're about to see a major social experiment on the impacts of public water fluoridation because
Yep.
we're going to see a lot of places remove fluoride from their water. Several states already have passed, that as law,
Right.
and there'll be an easy comparison. State without fluoride versus state with fluoride. Population that doesn't have fluoride, population that does. And we've seen this in the past, but we're about to get a whole bunch of fresh data. And I just hope people pay attention that, you know, we've seen the ADA warning about the increasing costs, the undue
Right.
burden on underprivileged people. These are things, this isn't a political point of view, but the science is there that at the levels that we've been using it, fluoridated water is safe and effective at what it does. And if there's something better, then let's use it. I think
Yeah.
seeing that
The
with,
greatest public health initiative in history. It truly is, in my opinion.
and we're seeing that with other things as well. You know, dentists still use chlorhexidine for a lot of things, and it's for a time was the most effective thing we knew about for various uses. Kills all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
Problem is, we now know it kills too much stuff. There's
Yeah.
good things in there too. And
Yeah.
if we can find solutions that are more targeted and get rid of the, harmful bacteria, the
Right.
harmful things that are taking root in there without killing the things that are beneficial, then maybe we should replace it. I think we have some things now in that area that deserve more consideration because there's good research showing that some of these things are as or more effective without being quite as harmful. And I think, at some point we make those changes when we see enough research. And that's everyone's kind of perspective to judge. I can't tell someone when they need to
Right.
say it's enough research. That
Well,
said, we've got recommendations and we should look to organizations that are dedicated to taking this research and compiling it into recommendations. And that's something I'm
agreed.
big on publicizing. When, public health organizations are doing that, they should be doing it in an upstanding way that we can follow. And
Yeah.
when associations do that, or international panels convene to discuss periodontal, protocols and stages, we should pay attention. And that's something I think it's important for publications like the ones that I run to be covering and to really be sharing stories from when we have that new information.
Well, and one of the things I love about Connexion is they have, they've got Inside Dentistry,
Yeah.
and they also have Compendium, and I've written for both. And Compendium is really it's a peer review kind of situation where you need your references and you need all that. And I think there's a place in the market for both, which is why I'm glad that both are offered. But you do need, you need the places where I can spout about here's the greatest thing and I think it's super cool. But at the same time, we also need those publications and those ways of getting information out that says, here is this new thing. This is, where its limitations are. This is where it applies the best. And you can only do that in a science-based environment. You can't learn that from, a People magazine of dentistry. So we need, both of those pieces. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about like the business side,
Mhm.
because you get a chance to see a lot of the corporate things happen. And
Yes.
so we've seen a couple of big business deals lately in dentistry. How do you see that impacting the whole industry?
Well, on a macro level over the last, probably 5 to 10 years, what we've seen is the investor class, people who professionally take their money and make a bet that this company, this industry is going to make me more money,
Right.
noticed, wow, dentists generally make a lot of money. Dentistry seems like a profitable industry. Everyone always needs dental care. And oh, there's a lot of research and breakthrough. What I was talking about earlier, we're on the cusp of a lot of changes and a lot of
Mhm.
new options. So venture capital has been paying attention to dentistry for a little while. And what that's done is it's poured a lot of money into the industry for research. A lot of startups suddenly have millions of dollars to use to develop technologies, to develop
Yeah.
things. And then, of course, we're now seeing, because it's been going on for long enough, the next wave of this is sort of the winnowing out. And that's where we have a lot of mergers and acquisitions. The medical industry went through this on the practice side to the point where there's very few medical doctors who run a single doctor medical practice that's not part of a large group. Most doctors
Absolutely.
operate out of a group associated with a group of hospitals, and the hospitals, again, are a group. And dentistry, we're seeing very similar thing happening on the clinical side with DSOs and other group practice models. And when they first started, I think they were in a race to the bottom where it was, how can we provide as profitable of dentistry as possible? But I think we've hit a point where that's not the case. The group practice models are really looking at how can we provide the most profitable operating platform for these dental practices to provide the best possible care. And with that, we've seen they have more capital resources to invest in technologies and to invest in them at scale. And by doing that, a lot of the biggest DSOs have the latest digital technologies in their practices. And that means the other practices that now have to compete with them need to be able to offer similar services to their patients. And so it's pushed the industry to a new place. We're seeing that on the manufacturer side too. We're seeing lots of people come out with technologies, but then bigger companies are buying up other companies. And we've
Right.
seen a lot of changes, especially, lately. You mentioned a couple mergers on the, clinical side. Well, on the
Yes.
practice side, yes, DSOs are buying up practices at a regular pace. They continue to grow. But on the, technology side, two 3D printing companies are now gone because they've been absorbed by other companies. We recently saw SprintRay, who's been growing and really innovating in the 3D printing space. They bought what was the 3D printing portfolio of Desktop Health. Formerly, these were the former EnvisionTech printer technologies. And EnvisionTech was cutting edge a number of years ago in the lab space.
Yes.
They really pioneered a number of printing technologies and processes. And by bringing that into what SprintRay does, SprintRay's focus has been more on smaller format. And, they created what I kind of call the Keurig of 3D printers, which
Yeah.
is an amazing thing for single, restoration printing.
Mhm.
But what getting EnvisionTech is likely to open for them is a much bigger, larger format and more production scale printing platform. And there's a lot of applications for that, and a lot of reasons why practices and dental labs are going to want to be paying attention to where they're going to take those technologies. Similarly, the same day that press release hit my inbox, another one followed about 10 minutes later from PacDent announcing that they had purchased Accuretta. So
Mhm.
Accuretta is another 3D printing company with technology that people liked. And the real thing here is PacDent has already been ahead in the materials section on 3D printing.
Yes.
The Rodan line of materials have a lot of unique applications, some really good physical characteristics. And so now they have an in-house printer line with which to marry those materials. And the more I talk with people who are in the 3D printing space, the materials development is really where the innovation is going to push this to new places.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are companies out there that are printing zirconia, but just like if you remember when, the first milled zirconias came out a number of years ago, they were very, very white
Yeah,
and took forever to process. And, you had to basically leave it in a furnace overnight to get it sintered
yeah,
properly.
yeah,
And now you can do that in minutes because we get better and better with these materials. Well, you can 3D print zirconia, but it's slow and it's not quite there. And the physical characteristics are not as strong as the zirconia that you're going to get when you mill it at this point.
yeah.
But it's going to catch up. And I think we're
Mhm.
going to be seeing people printing in, lithium disilicate type materials and things like that that have greater translucency and a higher, aesthetic threshold. And we are going to get to the point where you are going to be able to, I was talking with a lab technician the other week for an article I wrote for an upcoming issue of Inside Dental Technology. And one of the things he was talking about was just that he can't wait for milling to go away because it's dirty, it's loud, it uses lots of material that just becomes dust, and then you
Yeah.
have to sweep up that dust and vacuum out your machines and all of that. He loves 3D printing because it's cleaner, it's
Mhm.
less wasteful, it's more economical for a lot of reasons, but the materials aren't there yet. He can't get rid of his mills
Yeah,
until he can replace them with something that is equal or better. And we're not there yet with most of the 3D printing materials, but every year we're getting closer and closer. The printers are going to get faster and more accurate to a degree, but they're there now for
yeah.
what you need. We just don't have materials that can equal the physical properties we need yet, but we will. And they're going to be coming very, very quickly. And I think, this is an area where people always talk about, dentists don't want to be lab technicians. Don't want to do all their lab work. And that's true. There's going to be a subset who want to have a mill or a printer and they want to do everything in-house.
Yep.
And that's a great model. But you don't need to be a lab tech to take advantage of what these technologies can do even in your practice. If you have a 3D printer that's connected to the internet and you have the right materials on hand, you can scan, have a lab technician do all the things they do, just like you always would approve the work that they've done, but you can have it printed in your practice so that you don't have to wait for a shipment to come in. You don't have to wait for anything. And that to me that's going to be the ultimate sort of digital dentistry CAD CAM workflow that works for everyone. You keep the expertise of the people who do nothing but study how teeth should look, how they should be
Mhm.
structured, and how to produce that in this day and age. You know, this lab tech I was interviewing, someone who, when I first interviewed him 15 years ago, was all about handmade and,
Yeah,
building layers of ceramic and the artistry that's inherent in that. And now he was telling me if I hadn't adopted technology, I would not be, not just surviving, but doing great with his lab today.
yeah.
That doesn't mean he's given up the artistry he did. It means he's learned to use different tools to affect the same results. And so that's why he's waiting for this material revolution to get where he needs it to get. because when it does, yeah, he'll put his mills away and stop, creating all that dust, but he's still going to be looking to create incredibly realistic teeth that are going to also function like the teeth they're replacing.
Well, and I have this theory that so when I started, we only had film. And then we went to digital. And I remember this with a great feeling of relief. I actually took my film processor out of the office one Friday afternoon and I tossed it in the dumpster. And one of the regrets I have from that is I wish I would have taken a picture of it laying in the dumpster when I did. But I built a new office in 2007. And in 2007, the architect who knows me pretty well, he didn't ask me, okay, so where do we put the dark room? Because we didn't need it. I have this theory that in 10 years or less, when somebody builds a new office, the whole concept of the in-office dental lab is going to change a lot. Because just like you said, you don't need the dust. You don't need to pour models anymore. There's a lot of things that you can do as long as the model is virtual. You don't need that physical model anymore. And I really think that the dental office lab, that nowadays, I don't know any dentist that has their own, little lab. And I'm not talking about a commercial lab that's making crowns. I'm talking about the one where you're doing, bleaching trays and stuff.
Yeah.
Even those people won't show to patients. Look at this, because they're messy and they're cluttered. But I think, 10 years tops, that'll be a very clean environment with a couple of printers in there and some resins around, but you won't see model trimmers and you won't see, huge bins full of dust that gets mixed with water that we, then mix in the proper ratios and all of that, because it's just going to get phased out. That's where it's going. And like you said, some of the materials aren't there yet, underlying the word yet, but they will get there. And the other thing that I think is interesting about printing is I think a lot of the printing companies, when they first got into the space, they thought the dental office, that's going to be the market for this. And you talked about these small platform printers. Those are great for dental offices, but if you own a dental lab, you want something where you can make,
Yeah.
16 things at once. And that's where I think you're seeing these large platform printers now, that allow people to do that sort of thing. And so it becomes the best of both worlds. You hit on that where, the doctor says, I don't want to be a lab tech. And the answer is you're not. You take the scan, you send it to the lab sends you, rather than the physical case, they send you the file. And then, you make it yourself in a few hours and you deliver. And I think that's where it's all going to go.
Yeah. I mean, and I think people need to be ready to and willing to not forget and give up on things of the past that they value, but realize where and what is driving change. I came from a newspaper background, a print background, and over the years, I've had to become a digital publisher as well. And, every magazine, and not just dental magazine, every magazine out there has gotten thinner and thinner over the years because
Yeah.
it's just the way that both the economy of that business model and the world of publishing has changed. And yeah, I miss some of the, fun of putting together a massive print book or putting together a daily newspaper. But I also love the excitement of putting together new and exciting forms of content and finding new ways to engage with people through the internet, through digital formats. When I was in journalism school, there was a whole separate track for newspaper, for magazine, for radio, for TV. And now we all have to do some of everything. And I think it's
Yeah.
funny, like I never took any classes in any other media than newspaper. Yet here I am working in a magazine environment and an online publishing environment. And I always think back to this one photo that a friend of ours, Dr. Jeff Rohde, took, and we used,
Oh,
I
yeah.
worked with him back when I was at Dental Compare. He helped found
Yeah.
that site and worked with him there. And it was a photo from his practice of underneath one of his partner's desks, and it was just spilled all over on the floor underneath the desk. All of the dental magazines, every title and masthead was there. And, he basically said, this is what's happening to these things now because we're moving to new ways of publishing. And that photo comes to
Yeah.
mind time because we need to adapt whatever industry. I'm in publishing, and yes, it's dental publishing, and I love this industry, and I love getting to know all about the science and the technology and just the people, because we all know this is a great people industry as well.
Oh, it's
But
terrific
at the
people.
same time, I'm in publishing, and it's an exciting and at times scary time in the world of publishing because it's all changing. The nice thing about being a dentist these days is you still have the core things that you need to do. You still need to, treat patients. You need patients walking in the door, and you're going to do the same things maybe with different tools. Here in the publishing industry, it's a whole new world of how do we actually create content that people are going to value, people are going to engage with, and we're going to find a way to have someone back us so we can make some money doing it because, we are for profit in most instances in the publishing industry. And it's one of those things I really am excited every day because we're trying new things. We're looking at new ways of communicating, and we're going to find new ways to make publishing work in a new space. And that space changes every year. AI is a part of it now. We have to use it for what we do because we need to be able to create our content in a faster way, but we can never sacrifice the quality that we need, the accuracy that we need at the core of what we do. And so, you know, circling back to what we were talking about almost at the beginning, it's all about learning about the new tools available, figuring out how you can apply
Yes.
them, and then going and running with them. And it's a lot of fun because it's always something new. I got into journalism because I didn't ever want to do the same thing over and over and over
Okay.
again. And, for better or for worse, some ways more new than I necessarily wanted. But every day I get to learn something new. I get to see something new. And nowadays I get to try something new. And I think that in a dental practice today, that same opportunity exists. And yes, you can use the same things. And certainly, if a material's working and you trust it and you get the results you want out from it, there's no reason to try something new all the time just to try it. But it's a good idea to keep your eye out there for what else might be out there because maybe at some point you're going to stumble on that new thing that's going to not only do what you were getting your previous material to do, but do something else and do it even better. And that's the world we live in. There's always something new to keep your eye on and always something new to be excited about.
Well, and I think that's probably why you and I have always gotten along so well, is that we both love the new stuff and we love trying the new stuff. And you've applied that to what you do. In fact, it was funny when you talk about newspaper, there was a guy, um, it doesn't even matter how long, it was a long time ago, but he was a sports writer and he joined a local sports radio station and left the newspaper. And he always identified himself as the former ink-stained wretch, which I thought was kind of a great moniker for him. But because we both love the new stuff, I think that's always kind of given us this common ground. This is it's a wonderful time to be alive. And I think that's probably maybe where we should leave this is that, technology is changing things so much. And, everything in life is a yin and a yang. There's always a good and a bad. Um, One of the reasons I love baseball is it's two pieces of leather, identical, put together and the amazing things you can do with it. But you have to, like you said, you have to stay current. You can't just say, I'm always going to do this way. Um, one of the things that really drive me crazy is when I ask somebody, why are they doing something that way? And they say, well, that's because that's the way we've always done it. And, success or excellence or whatever, those are good excuses, but not just because that's the process. So, Noah, thank you very much for spending the time with me. I really appreciate this. I know a lot of people don't get a chance to ever hear like the journalists' side of things in the industry. And the thing that's always impressed me is because you're so knowledgeable that literally I feel like if you went to a cocktail party, you could probably impersonate a dentist. And at least as long as nobody asked you to, like actually use your hands, you could probably convince them. So it's
Yeah.
great to get your perspective because you know so much about the industry, but you also know so much about your own industry. So thank you very much.
Well, I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. And, anytime you want, I'm always here. It's, been a pleasure to be your colleague for so long. And I just, always love the excitement you bring to what you do. So thanks for having me on. It was really a pleasure and I enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, Noah. Okay, everybody, we're at the end. So thank you very much for watching the Technology Evangelist podcast. I'm Dr. John Fluke. We are sponsored by Medidenta Digital in our digital endeavor here, and we will be back with more episodes soon. Thank you very much.